I'm born in 1962 in the USA, Mountain View, California. That's where I would grow up. Born to immigrant family. So immigrated from the Netherlands to South Africa, then South Africa to America. My mother and father were both Dutch citizens when I was born in America. So that makes it different, somewhat like similar situations for other people. Immigrant families, so we learned Dutch at home. We didn't learn English until school days and everything else, so made for a little bit of fun. But since my brother was a little older, 2 years before I went to school, he was having problems in school, so my parents went to English with us at home. So by the time I got to school, I knew a little bit more English than my brother did starting school. So my early school years were a little bit easier and a little bit better. Growing up in California, beautiful state, it's warm, good seasons, can go around. Childhood was normal childhood. Play with kids, go to school, get your education, this one, that one. After I graduated school at the age of 16 in 1979, I did another year in the restaurants. Then I went to work for a couple computer companies. Made some good money, worked for computer companies, but I didn't like it. Too much drugs and alcohol. Not what I would later like to have done in life. But you're young, you do that kind of stuff. So those were the early years. And then after a few years of working, I got ready to start to travel. Jana.
Good morning.
Good morning. Where?
Mama.
Get for me?
Mama.
No, you have to get.
Mama.
No, this is Dada's. Mama's. Where's yours? Mama's, yeah. Get yours. No.
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 No. I'd traveled before, mostly during the holidays, down to Mexico by bicycle and with my uncle and other people to celebrate the holidays down in Mexico, since I didn't celebrate with the family in America when I was about probably 15, 16. Started my parents, because that's the only time my dad could get vacation from his business. So my parents would take their vacation together, and then me and my brother were free to go with friends or do whatever we wanted. So I started to learn to go down to Mexico for Christmas, because it's next door to California. Easy bike ride, it's warm. So the season is warmer down in Mexico than it is in California by a little bit. So I would ride down there, spend about a month or two over the Christmas holidays, and then come back up to the States. So I started that when I was about 14, 15. But those were my first kind of real trips with bicycle. Then when I came back, like I say, I started to work. And my first real long bicycle travel was, I think, 1986. I started traveling. I flew to Europe, and for about 6 months I traveled all around Europe. At that time, Europe was different than it is today. Every country was its own country. There was no such thing as Schengen. So every border you had to cross, you had to go get your passport stamped and this and that. So for 6 months, I cycled from the Netherlands, from family, around all of Europe, down to France, up around, through Yugoslavia, back around Germany, this and that. Went for 4 countries in one day for my birthday to have a beer. So I went from Luxembourg to Belgium to Germany, or Netherlands to Germany, or Germany to Netherlands, for 4 beers in each country for one, and a passport stamp for my birthday in that year. And I met a lot of fellow travelers at that time, young people traveling from Australia and other countries. And they all started talking about their home countries and places to see and interesting places and Asia and different things. So when I got back at the end of that year, I went back to work in the restaurants, started making some money. Then I decided the next year to cycle again. I wanted to go overseas, but my mom had suggested I first cycle across the United States to see the country I was raised in. So I cycled from California all the way across to New York, to Washington, D.C., up around. I met up with my brother in Long Island because he was doing sailboat racing at that time. And then I cycled all the way back to California, and that took me almost a year. And then I took a break for a few odd months, went back to work, made some money, started making my plans, today we look on a computer or a little cell phone for flight options, and at that time instead I looked in the newspaper, and during that time they had what were called around the world flights. So you would fly all the way around from like San Francisco to Europe to another place, then to another place, then to another place, and then all the way back around to Asia, and then back around to America. So I looked into flights like that and realized I could fly to one place, get off with a bicycle, cycle across a few countries or something to the next airport, then pick up a month or two later a flight from there, and then continue on my around the world journey. So for my first flight, I think I paid something like $1,000 or so, and it was good for 1 year flying. So my first flight was back into England, and then from England we went to Russia, and then from Russia flew down to Africa. So I went to Kenya, cycled around Kenya, down through Kenya, through parts of Africa, then back to Kenya, and then from there I flew to, I think it was India. I cycled across part of India, and then from India I flew, I think it was to Australia. That was the next stop from Australia. Then in Australia I got to Cairns, cycled down from Cairns to Sydney to visit friends, and there I found out about the really cheap flights back into Asia at that time. So during my break I'd only spent about a half a year about this time. Season was getting to be about winter time in Australia, so my friend suggested, well, why don't you go to Asia for the summer? So I flew up from there to Singapore. Then from Singapore I cycled up to Bangkok, around through Malaysia, across into Cambodia, Vietnam. Vietnam at that time, we were only allowed to go halfway up the country because they were still not completely changed after the war there. This was about 1988, so the world was a lot different then. So I had to cross back into Laos, went back to Thailand, and then from there I flew to Hong Kong, from Bangkok to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong I went into China, mainland China. That was my first experience of mainland China. I went into, you had to take the ferry from Hong Kong into Guangzhou because there were no roads or cities going from Hong Kong to Guangzhou at that time. So I took the ferry into, or a little boat into Guangzhou. And then from Guangzhou I was allowed to cycle around with a bicycle. This would be my first attempt to get a Tibetan visa. So I went to the special government place in Beijing and I applied for my Tibetan visa. But of course, we all know that those years weren't good years in China, so before I could leave the country, they canceled my visa to Tibet. That was 1988. So around the time of the Tiananmen Square stuff, so they changed their mind to what was going on. So I had to leave the country back to Hong Kong, so I had to take a train in between to get back. Then from Hong Kong, I flew to Korea. From Korea, I cycled from Seoul all the way down to the bottom of Korea. Then I got a ferry boat across to Japan. Then I cycled up from the ferry boat from Japan all the way up to Tokyo. And then from Tokyo, I worked my way back and then got back to Seoul, Korea. And then from Seoul, I flew all the way back. The flight brought me all the way back to Australia. And then in Australia, I went across. It was back to spring and summertime there. So I took a flight over to New Zealand. I went to New Zealand for a few months of cycling in New Zealand. Then from New Zealand back to Tasmania. Tasmania back to the mainland of Australia, across to Perth. And then from Perth, it was a flight back to, I think it was Fiji at that time. Spent a few days in Fiji doing some scuba diving and some other things. Then the next stop was Hawaii. I spent about a week or two in Hawaii, then back to San Francisco and back home. So that was my first around-the-world trip. So I got a real good taste for these around-the-world trip flights. And then I had to go back to work for a little while. And then as soon as about 6 months or so came around, I planned my next bike trip. Family supported me as far as when I came home. I always had a house to go to when I first got back home until I could get a job and everything else. And quite a few times since I was only back in America for 2 or 3 months before I would start another bicycle tour. I would usually go back to my parents' house, spend maybe a couple months, make some money. As soon as I had gotten enough money to go again, I got my bike and I took off, because my next trip would take me from California up through Canada, up into Alaska, and up to the farthest point north. And then from there I cycled back down. And then when I got back to San Francisco on my way back to Coastal Road, again I stopped at my parents' house, worked for a couple months to make a bit more money. And then after that I headed back down towards Mexico, and Mexico into South America, and cycled all the way across Central America, Nicaragua, San Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. Then from Panama, there's no road from Panama to South America. It's called the Darien Gap, very difficult and dangerous to pass. So I chose to fly from Panama City into Colombia. And then from Colombia, since I was down in the coastal town, I went over to Venezuela, then looped back, did a short loop from Venezuela back into Colombia, then up into the Andes, then the Andes across from Colombia to Ecuador, Ecuador, I went and visited a cousin of mine. She was doing some work there at the time. And then we went to the Galapagos Islands because when you're there, you may as well do that one. It's an adventure of a lifetime. This is where the animals have no fear of human beings. Sit next to a seal and some other things. And then went back to Guatemala, back from Galapagos to Ecuador, then Ecuador back up the Andes, which is a 5,000 meter straight up climb from the coastline. So you just climb up the mountain. This bike took me over a day and a half to cycle up to the top of the mountain. Then once you're at the top, you're back over the plateau. You're into the Andes Plateau. Cycle that down all the way down from Ecuador to Peru, Peru to Bolivia, past Machu Picchu, all the normal sites, a bunch of other stuff, into Bolivia, Bolivia into Chile, Chile around to Argentina, Argentina back up around to Paraguay, then Uruguay, then Brazil, and then back there. I had some issues, and so I flew home back again from Paraguay, back to the United States, and then took a few months of work again to make some money again. The first 20 years is growing up. Then after that, I started the travel phase for about 10 years, from about the age of 23, 24 to 31 or 2. I did traveling around the world. That's when I did all the bike adventures. Then the next stage of my life, when I came back, I did about 4 or 5 years of just kind of recovering from getting sick. Then I went back to Asia, went to Nepal, India, Nepal, and Tibet. Finally got into Tibet and finished my learning from stuff that I'd learned earlier in India, to find out what I'd learned in India was a completely different Buddhism than what I wanted to learn. So when I got into Nepal and Tibet in '99, I really went from Vedic Buddhism to Nepali Tibetan Buddhism, learning that. Then I spent my time in Tibet. I cycled to Lhasa over the mountains from Nepal to Lhasa. By bicycle, was allowed to do it at that time. Then back, because wasn't permitted to go from. It was a different kind of visa back then, so I couldn't just take the same visa and go into mainland China. It was good for only, even though it was a Chinese visa, it was only good for Tibetan area, not for mainland, so I had to go back to Nepal. And that was in '99, and I went back to some other Asian places, Myanmar, Burma, Vietnam again, and some other places, and then back to the USA. After that trip, I kind of stopped traveling for about 10 years. I tried what we all call the normal life. I did my meditation. I did Maharishi meditation. I started advancing my meditation stuff and my Vedic practices, learning Jyotish and some other things. Doing my cooking for my main job. And I did that for about the next 2000 to 2013. It's about 13 years. And then in 2013, well, you kind of met me along the way. That's when I started cycling again, and since then I've been back on the road. Sometimes I travel with friends that I have met along the way. So I'll travel small, maybe a few months with some friends. And here sometimes a little too friendly, a little too much want me to stop for photos.
Ричард Хакет сразу стал объектом повышенного внимания у аргентин. Еще бы, турист исколесил весь мир в любом уголке планеты. Здесь, в частности, впечатляет.
Mizunguko ya mjini hapa kwa sababu tunapaswa kwenda Arusha.
Flags on top of hillsides or on top of Mandalas here in Tibet or the Mongolian region is very popular among the locals. Usually a blue scarf showing the sky, asking for blessings, for the wind to take your blessings to all your friends or family, whoever you've blessed, until the blessing flag has worn out and then the blessing has been completed. Well, the reason I become Buddhist is I grew up. My parents, my dad is Catholic. My dad is Catholic, his family is Catholic. My mom's family is basically nothing. They have no religion. They kind of just believe in spirits and other things, depending on the family member. My dad, when I'm growing up, we never went to church. My dad never went to church, but he was Catholic, so I learned about that. I learned about the other stuff. But since we never went to church, just saw what other friends did, I didn't like what I saw, didn't believe how they said things, so I started questioning it for myself. And then later, when I started to travel the world, I saw different religions practiced different ways in different countries, more so than in the United States. And then when I got to India, somewhere in the 80s, late 80s, in India I started seeing the Hinduism, this very big spiritual, religious, yoga, this, that, the next thing. So I started to learn. I looked at a couple of them. Wasn't interested in Hinduism, 3,000, 8,000, 2,000 gods. Really wasn't my cup of tea. Turned out some other things. And then a friend of mine there introduced me to, as we got closer to Nepal area, to Buddhism, which is not a religion, but is a philosophy. So I tried to understand what is the difference in between this religion and what they called philosophy. So in the 80s I learned about the Vedic tradition, which goes back before Hinduism and all that. And the principles that the Vedics had brought later into Buddhism. But it became a philosophy, not a religion. So I started learning the different people, the different gods, the different things, how everything was connected. I like Ganesh, the elephant god, the remover of obstacles. Because in life we have a lot of obstacles that need to be removed. So I went to do that. But then the more I studied, I tried an ashram here, an ashram there in India. Like I say, the Hinduism, the other ones, it really wasn't my thing. But when I got to the Buddhist temple, and I spent 1 month in the Buddhist temple, I learned a very simple life. We did a little bit of chanting, not like I do today, a little bit of meditation, we did chores, we did things, just daily life. And it seemed more reasonable, and I started practicing it a little bit more, diving into it, and learning a bit more. Then as I traveled on to Myanmar, later I did another temple in Myanmar. There I learned to walk with a begging bowl, learn humility, learn some other of the aspects of the Buddhist philosophy. There it's turned more into a religion, but still the basics are the philosophy. So I kind of liked it. And then into Thailand, even more religious like Buddhism, but also you can get to a lot of temples and a lot of monasteries where it's still more philosophy-like, and the practices and the stuff was good. Like I say, started in 1980 something. I didn't call myself Buddhist until probably in the 90s when I started saying, okay, I believe in the Buddhist philosophy, mid-90s. And then I wanted to go to places like Tibet and learn more about the Tibetan Buddhists, because I saw that was even a little bit more different. I'd already been now by then to Korea and Japan, saw the offshoots, Taoism, Taoism, but the different forms of Buddhism. And I started learning from different teachers to take what you can understand, let the rest go, take it as a seed. If someone tells you something, it's like being planted a seed of knowledge. Maybe later you'll understand it when your level is to understanding it, this and that. I liked some of the practices and principles, but again, I don't like when it becomes religious. I like it when it stays more a philosophy, and this is what we choose to do to find a path to a better being, a better enlightenment, or however you want to call it. Everyone has a different name for it. I call it just bettering oneself, so we become a better human being. If we are a better human being, people around us become better. Our actions, the way we look at the world, it becomes better, it becomes more peaceful. So it becomes easier, less stressful. What is Buddha? We are Buddha, from my experience, from what I've learned, from the teachings, from going back through looking at Indian teachings, looking at Nepali teachings, looking at Hindu teachings, looking at all the different teachings. If I go back to the original, what Buddha is we are Buddha. Everyone is born with the ability to be a Buddha within, a person who can reach a higher, better person. So therefore, we're all born with a Buddhist thing, but as we get taught by society, depending on where we grow up, we get taught whatever the society says is right, is wrong, is this, is that, this is how you do things, this is how you do things. Whether or not you chase money more than something else, chase happiness, contentment. These are all things I found around as I've traveled around the world. I see that the world teaches us or brainwashes us to see something different than the simplicity of life. After all, we are, even though we call ourselves human, we're still an animal. So we still have basic needs like everyone else. Eat, sleep, do our daily business, and find the happiness, whatever your goal of happiness is. Well, with human beings, happiness becomes very, very complicated because we're told we need a house. Okay, house is simple. It can just be simple walls like I build for my cat shelters. Just something to keep warm and keep nice and keep safe from the elements in. Versus man wants $1 billion house with all these fancy items and these fancy things and all this paintings and this and art and all these material objects. When you become more Buddhist-like, it's just things. We can't take them with us when we die, so why are we getting all these things? Why am I spending my entire life trying to get all these things that I cannot take with me elsewhere? But things that I do with Buddhism is like sharing my food with the cats, sharing my food with the dogs, helping other human beings. That's stuff I can enjoy now and take with me into the next world, because it's a part of what becomes, as some would say, your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call it. It becomes part of your being. Last night, campsite got demolished. 40, 50 mile an hour winds last night. Coming through, pushing the hammock all over the place. Knocking the bike over, knocking everything down last night. Big mess out of everything, but we'll clean it up and get going. In my research, then I learned what is called moving meditation, which is my favorite meditation, and you just get your mind into a state of, well, they call it bliss, I call it just contentment, happiness. And so when I bicycle around the world, I'm in this state of consciousness that allows me to absorb meditation while bicycling, chanting. Occasionally I'll pick up my maul or something else and recite the Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Or I'll do some of the other chanting that I believe are good. I've learned some from different masters. If I eat meat or something else, Om Bharat Hazaraham, to bless the meat, to ask for forgiveness that I've eaten meat. When people give me meat or something else, or I decide I need that day a hamburger or something else, because I'm human. So Buddha says we still have, one of the teachings I was learned very hard after learning meditation was, when you meditate too much, you get into a field of consciousness like the monks do. They become very conscious about the meditation, very conscious about that, but they're not conscious in the outside world. Well, unfortunately, I still have to, I'm not a monk, so I have to work in the outside world. So I also have to, I have my spiritual world. So it's like keeping one foot in the spiritual world and one foot in the real world. You have to find a balance between the two, because it's very difficult. If you meditate too much, you only concentrate on meditation, this, that, and you neglect family, friends, outside life of this. Until I go to the stage of becoming, I learn more, and whatever they want to say, come to another level, and then I've decided that I want to become nothing but spiritual, then I can take my foot out of the other world. But in the meanwhile, I live in a world, like I said, that is brainwashed, that I need a house, I need possessions, I need a few things. So I try to keep my possessions and my stuff down to a minimum. I don't have attachment to things anymore. I learn to just, I use when I no longer have use for it. I find someone else that has use for it, and I just give it away. The item will find its purpose in life, being used. Since I'm no longer using it, why am I keeping it? So many people keep stuff in the house, keep stuff everywhere, collect things, and then for what? The item just sits there not being used, not for the purpose it was brought into this world to do something. So that's how I feel with that one. I've had a few houses in America, different stages of my life. Like I say, different levels. As we learn something, someone plants a seed, we learn a little more, we become to another level, we become to this. During a few years of my life, after I had traveled and done a lot of stuff, the first realm of my first 10 years of travel, I went back to the States after being sick. I started getting sucked back into, as people would say, back into the normal brainwashing part of life. I started losing bits of my meditation and everything else. The practice was becoming less and less. I was becoming more. I had the girlfriend, I bought the house, I was working more, saving money, building stuff, building more money, bigger house, better things, sold the house, better house, new house, taking care of the girlfriend, needing the requirements that need there. Again, still practicing my TM, practicing my meditation, but just not the same as I do now, not like the moving meditation. So after a few odd years, I started missing that, and I changed back to, that's the years that I traveled to Tibet, and then again reinforced my views on Buddhism, this and that, and tried to find a better balance when I came back. So I moved to out to Iowa, and then in Iowa that's where I was last living. I built a house there that was specifically designed for Vedic principles. So it's like, I would almost say, a temple house. It's built kind of like a temple house. So the house was very simple. You would walk in, open area, sort of like this house is, open area. The backside had a kitchen. Everything was facing feng shui or Vedic directions for peace and harmony. Bedroom was simple, the stuff was there. inside the house, I had a lot of tapestries and different things hanging around the house to remind me of meditation and this one and that one. I started work at the university, and there I was a chef, so I was cooking organic vegetarian food for all the kids there for about 3.5 years. I also worked at a place called the Raj, which was a Vedic place, again, cooking medical stuff, learning from Vajas, basically, I guess I would call a big type monk. They're monks that chant and bless, but also the Vajas are doctors that know all the principles of the history of the natural healing from the Vedic, which is part of Buddhist teachings, also found in Chinese TMC. This all comes from the Vedic principles, so all comes to the same. Ayurveda to that one, the difference is, and like in Ayurvedic, they don't believe in the needles like acupuncture does, but they just believe in acupressure, because it's just like I say, as we evolve, we learn different balances and different levels of our enlightenment, and sometimes one view takes it one way, another view takes it another way. So I had the houses, I did that. I went to what was, like we say, called more normal life, but then I started having problems. Life became more difficult. People, of course, that I was around were doing things that weren't right, being less spiritual, less in harmony with nature, so it became difficult, and I decided after a while with problems, I was going to sell everything and start a life of travel again. So in 2013, I sold everything I owned, gave most all my possessions, but maybe about 2 boxes worth of possessions, mostly my Buddhist items, my spiritual items, but even a lot of those I gave to friends that believed in it and everything else, and I gave all my possessions away. And I left the United States in 2013 with a bicycle and 4 bags, and started on the road back to finding spiritual peace and happiness.